There we go. Now we're recording. So let me pray for us. Father, thanks so much for this time that you've carved out for us. And we just ask that you would help us to make good use of it. Um, there is so much to learn and such good stuff to be able to help people on their journeys. You be our guide. Thank you for your presence with us. Thank you for every single one of these men and women who are committed to following you. We pray together in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, it's good to see you all back again. And hopefully we will have a better uh, uh, sequenced time for this section. I will do my very best to stay on top of grading and to not get behind. I am feeling much better. Had a little bit of R&R time, so hopefully we're in a good place and we'll stay there. I thank you again for your patience and would affirm again that I am happy to meet with any of you one-on-one if you still have questions about the previous class, or if there are things that you want to talk about the previous class. But this one, jumping into this one, agenda for tonight, let me pull up share my screen. And pull up my I don't want to sort this right now, people. Now, let's see. See if they'll let me pull it up now. There we go. Just a couple of things as we kind of launch into this. There are some things that you are going to want to keep like pretty much right in front of you as you're studying and as you're going through this class. One is the reminder of the grace, truth, and time model, that grace, truth, and time equals growth. And then our goals that we are looking at: competence, character, and connection. So we want to give you tools and skills that will be useful for you in your as you work with clients. We're also focusing on our own character growth. And in addition to that, I'm going to say that in this class, one of the things that is really important is that we be able to assess a client's character structure. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time when we're together practicing that, and you're going to have a number of exercises for doing that as well. And then, of course, the connection, the being able to be together. Let me just say, along with connection, that you don't have a homework partner assignment this week. You will have one beginning next week. And now that we kind of know who all is here and who's kind of permanent, I will do a homework partners list and get that sent out to you and posted. Um, uh, in the next few days. Our goal for you is that you have everything that you need to be a licensed mental health counselor in your state. We'll take care of all of that we can. Some of that we need you kind of getting on top of. So it's not too early at all for you to be contacting your state, either your state counseling association or your state licensing board, and finding out what the requirements, the steps are for you to pursue licensure, because it's different in different states. There's not a one size fits all, and you want to be able to meet the criteria for your particular state. So it's just a good idea to go ahead and start forming a relationship with your licensing board and start getting that information pulled together, make it a checklist. And then, like I said, we are going to focus on the character model. So we want to be able to recognize whether our client's symptoms are indicative of attachment or separation or integration or adulthood. And often, as you're well aware, it will be more than one. It won't just be one area. So we have to learn to focus on a particular area. Rule of thumb is if we're uncertain, we always go back and start with attachment. That's our starting point. I don't think we need to have you guys introduce yourselves again, so I don't think we need to take time for that. But let's take just a minute here, and this for me, one of the most important pieces of this course is sharing resources. So does anybody, what I want you to start doing is, if you see or if you listen to a podcast, if you see a YouTube video, if you hear of a training or you have opportunity to take a training, I want you to share that with the group so that everybody begins to get a portfolio of those kinds of resources. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get to watch or listen to them all or review them all, peer-reviewed articles, anything like that. Doesn't mean you're going to get to investigate them all during the 7 weeks that we're in this class. But you will begin to assemble a file that you can go back to when you need it. And that becomes especially important when we're talking about things like some of these mental disorders that we will be called on to work with. Because as new counselors, you are going to feel uncertain about them, unsure about how to treat them early on in your career. So you need to be able to find resources that will help you with that. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you attend virtual classes, you'll receive credit. Some professors are requiring that you submit a statement to Blackboard that in the assignment that you attended the virtual class. I am comfortable with taking attendance and then going in and putting your points in so that you don't have one more thing that you have to do. So if that's all right with you guys, that's how I will do this class. Homework partners are going to start week 2. This is really, really, really important because it's something new for us. Easter break is going to be March 29th through April 4th. That means there will be no classes that week and the campus will be shut down. And so what that means is that our coursework gets bumped out a week. If I'm remembering correctly, this would have been week 4. So we have week 3 when we'll have a required virtual class. And then we will skip a week for spring break, and then we'll come back and pick up with week 4. Dr. Townsend's virtual class is Tuesday, April 6th. No word yet on who the fellows are going to be, or the fellow is going to be, but oh, it'll be good because it always is. And we've been asked to remind everybody, although I can't think of any of you guys that this has been an issue with, to keep your video on during class. I don't think we've had a problem with that with anybody. So what I want to start out here with is a little bit of an exercise for you guys to do. I'm going to put you in breakout groups, and I want you to talk in your breakout groups about why diagnosis would be important. I should have put in there, is diagnosis ever not appropriate? And then we're going to come back and talk about that. So I'm going to give you, about 10 minutes or so to talk about this in your groups. And let me stop my share, put my glasses back on. And let's see, we're going to do 4. Okay, now I am going to send you all to your breakout rooms, and I'll try to give you like a 1-minute warning or 2-minute warning when we're needing to come back to the room. Okay, so here you go. You're going to talk about why is diagnosis important? Is there ever a time when a diagnosis is inappropriate or not needed? Okay, here we go. Bye. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Mm, we've got everybody back. Okay, so let's do some feedback. Why is diagnosis important? What did you come up with in your groups?
We thought it was important in order to develop a treatment plan.
Okay.
So if we had a clear diagnosis, then we could figure out what maybe theories or techniques work best with that disorder and help us develop a treatment plan.
You'll hear Dr. Townsend say often in his videos that diagnosis informs treatment. And so a diagnosis is critical for that reason. What else? By the way, DX is the approved abbreviation for diagnosis.
Our group kind of talked about how diagnosis can also work on instilling hope in a client. Because a lot of times people come in not sure what's really bothering them or just kind of in a rut that doesn't really have a name to it. So kind of by informing and educating the client about what's going on and like kind of laying out that treatment process for them, it can kind of instill hope that that they can change, can grow, and can get better.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes just having a name for what is going on helps our clients just kind of breathe a sigh of relief. What else?
At one point in my group was insurance. Is it easier to bill insurance? This is something I wanted to know about, actually.
Absolutely. You cannot bill insurance without a diagnosis. It's a requirement. Without a diagnosis, they will just put your, well, actually what they'll do is return your billing to you. And they'll ask for most of the time they'll ask for a diagnosis. Some insurance companies, if you send it in without a diagnosis, they'll just send it back to you. And you have to hope that you either catch it or your billing department catches it and resubmits it. Insurance companies are in business to not pay out claims. So pursuing third-party payment is a challenge, but you absolutely can't do it without a diagnosis. What else did you all talk about?
We talked about,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
talked about how once you have a diagnosis, you can really benefit from all the research on successful treatments of specific disorders. And so
Good.
that can inform your
Excellent.
treatment plan.
Um, The diagnosis helps us know where to go looking for or what to pull out of our toolbox to be most helpful for our clients. Anything else you guys came up with? This is a great list. This is exactly what we look for with diagnosis. It's why we do this. Laura, did you have one?
Well, we had talked about how it's sort of a negative thing, but how if a person doesn't like their diagnosis, or if the diagnosis is something they don't agree with, that could be an issue
Yes.
in dealing with the client.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's start another box down here, and we're gonna skip over to, can having to have a diagnosis ever be problematic or inappropriate? If so, let's see, Laura, you said when
Where if the client didn't like it, yeah.
disagrees with diagnosis.
And so I was sort of wondering, is it ever, in that case, is it best not to share my diagnosis with them, but to keep getting to know them and keep working, you know, and until I'm more sure, I don't know. I was just,
What do you guys think? Is it better to share a diagnosis with clients, or is it better to keep a working diagnosis? And unless the client specifically asks for a diagnosis, we don't share a diagnosis with them, a clinical diagnosis with them. What do you think?
We had a question about that, Mary.
Okay. Jen.
We didn't know if it was required to tell them due to like it's part of their medical file.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do they have the right to know that?
They have the right to know. You are not required to offer it. But the client has the right to know. And if the client asks, what diagnosis are you giving me? Then you do have to give it to them.
Okay, so but we don't have to disclose it.
Mm-mm. The only
Unless-
exception to that is if you're submitting for third-party payment, if you're submitting it to their insurance company, I would never, ever do that without talking the diagnosis over with the client, because that diagnosis is going to follow them, not just in your files, but it's going to follow them with their insurance company.
Right, that's what we were wondering.
When you file a diagnosis with an insurance company on mental health, it becomes a pre-existing condition.
Okay.
So, so you do need to deal with that responsibly. What do we do when a client disagrees with our diagnosis? Says, I don't think that's me at all.
I guess you get them talking and say, tell me more about yourself.
Okay, you can
Find out.
get some more information, ask, what part of the diagnosis is problematic for you. What about DSM-5? Because you're not going to diagnose without DSM-5. Not going to happen. So the other thing I want you keeping close by you in this class is your DSM-5. Because if you're going to make a diagnosis, I'm going to ask you where you found that and what your criteria were for diagnosing. And that's going to come straight out of the DSM-5. It's not going to come out of your opinion. It's going to come out of identifiable criteria in the DSM-5. So, so what might you share with a client about how you arrived at the diagnosis?
Is it appropriate to share with them what the DSM is stating for criteria?
Absolutely. You identify, you itemize the symptoms that you have observed in the client. Then check with them to see if you're accurate on your symptom observation. And if you are accurate on your symptom observation, then correlate those to the criteria in the DSM-5. And then ask them what they think about it.
There are also questionnaires we can give them for sort of more objective scales.
Yeah, good point, Jeremy. Yes. What else might a diagnosis be problematic?
Something I discussed with our group, and then I've been reading in a book as well, was that sometimes people can almost identify with their diagnosis then. So then even if they're making progress, they don't realize it as quickly or even that it's evident because they think, oh, I am depressed. Therefore, even though I've had better days, I'm still depressed.
Yeah, their diagnosis becomes their identity rather than, for us, diagnosis is a set of criteria, as you guys said a few minutes ago, that allows us to choose effective interventions and treatment, establish an effective treatment plan for a client. It is not a label ever. One of the things that in clinicians that I supervise here, that I pound into them is that I don't ever want to hear them identify a client as a borderline. This is my borderline, or this is my bipolar, or this is my manic depressive. I don't want to hear that, because when we start using those labels for people, we forget that there is a person sitting across from us, not a diagnosis, and that the diagnosis is a tool to help us be more effective in helping that client. So, so I have a person who has maybe some borderline characteristics, or maybe I've got a full-blown borderline that I can diagnose with BPD. But I don't want that person. I don't want borderline becoming their label. I don't want alcoholic becoming somebody's label. I don't want drug user becoming someone's label. You know, people have to own up to what they're doing, but I don't want, that's a piece of who they are. It is not their identity. And a big part of what we're doing is working to help people move beyond a diagnosis into establishing a strong core identity. Anything else that you thought about with diagnosis becoming problematic?
Mary, our group talked about just age, like under 18, or is there an age guidance just because they haven't like hit certain developmental levels, or they're underage?
Yes. And the DSM tells us how old a person has to be to receive a diagnosis. And it used to be that we could not diagnose personality disorders, although DSM is trying to get rid of the personality disorders and change those into more developmentally appropriate models. And that is likely to happen in the next revision of the DSM. But it will tell you in the DSM, in the information, usually before you get to criteria, it will tell you that client must be at least 18 years of age, or client must be at least 25 years of age, or this condition or this diagnosis cannot be given for anyone less than 12 years of age. So again, DSM is our first line of defense for that. One of the things that is really good about the latest edition of the DSM is that it is the most developmentally organized DSM that we have ever had. And part of what that means is that often, even as we're looking at some of the childhood disorders, what we're being able to see is where the seeds of some of the full-blown personality disorders are being planted. And so it gives us the opportunity then to try to head those off in when we're seeing younger clients. For instance, a child who has been diagnosed with conduct disorder. Then for us, we're going to go back and look at that person at those personality levels, and we're going to see what is this child missed out on developmentally that they're now trying to get met with their acting out. Most of the time, that will be a place where we will definitely go back to attachment. And the other one with conduct disorder is often integration. So yes, age is a very significant factor. Gonna always caution you, and for young people, children and adolescents, be really cautious about putting a diagnosis on them. Be sure that you have strong criteria for that. And I'm going to tell you that you will get pressured in some organizations to issue a diagnosis. This is going to come into let's see, when a client does not meet criteria for a mental health diagnosis. When might that be?
Grief.
Okay. Yeah. If we've got a client who is grieving, is sad, is angry, is depressed, has some symptoms of depression, does that necessarily mean that they are in a full-blown depression, that they are diagnosable? Or is that what we would normally expect for someone who is going through that kind of a life circumstance? I'm seeing a lot of people right now during COVID who are expressing symptoms of that they're anxious, that they're worried, that they're maybe lethargic and not motivated to do anything, and I could put a label on them. I could call it generalized anxiety. I could call it mood disorder or depression. But what it is a normal reaction to the circumstances that people are living under right now. So yes, I'm still going to be diagnosing, but I'm not going to necessarily be giving them a mental health or a clinical diagnosis. Does that make sense? Now, sometimes people are depressed because it's appropriate for them to be depressed with what's going on in their lives. Sometimes they're anxious because it's appropriate for them to be anxious. You know, if they lost their job, or they don't know if they're going to have a job, and maybe they've got somebody in the family who is ill, and they don't know how they're going to pay their bills, and you know, those are causes for anxiety. They're normal causes for anxiety.
So what do you do when someone comes in and they're have a third party payer, and that first appointment to bill that out, what are you doing?
I have to tell you, Wendy, that's a big reason why I won't take third party payment, is because I do not want to be pressured into a situation where I have to put a label on somebody who doesn't need it. You know, I do sliding scale for people and make it as affordable for them as I can, but I don't do third party payment, and that's one of the major reasons why. Another one that is that it sometimes takes 6 months to a year to get paid. And we still have bills to pay. Now, if you are with an agency that requires that you submit third party payment for third party payment, then you're going to have to work with supervisors and that kind of thing to figure out, okay, how can we build this so the person can get their benefits? Go ahead, Barb.
I was just going to say, like, I don't know if this is ethics or not, but could you tell your client, say, hey, I think this is totally a normal thing you're going through, you're grieving, let's even say COVID. And so in order to get this on your insurance, we're going to say that you're experiencing depressive feelings. And so that falls under, but I want you to know that that's not what we're labeling you. We're going to work through this. That's not how I actually see you. So it's almost like this, like, wink, wink, but this is also kind of what we need to do. Or is that inappropriate?
Yeah, you have to decide whether that's something that you can live with. Again, it's not something I can live with, because that's going to go to that insurance company. That diagnosis, they don't care if it's because the person is in a stressful situation or whatever. All they care about is that number and those symptoms that we put in that report. And so that's what's going to go in that person's insurance record, in their medical insurance record. So now, having said that, DSM has made it easier for us to diagnose some of those things in one way, and that is, they used to be called V codes, but they are codes in the back of the book that are not official diagnoses with full-blown criteria. This used to be how we, there did not used to be any category for marriage counseling. So either we had to diagnose one or the other of the couple. We had to diagnose them with a mental illness, or there was a V code that we can use. And one of the best changes in the DSM-5 this time is that we now have a code like that we can use for parent-child conflict when we feel like the home environment is not beneficial to the child. Now, here's the kicker with that. Some insurance companies will pay for V codes, others will not. So, bottom line reality, Barbara, is if you're working in an organization that takes third-party payment, then you have to do what you can do to get services for your client and to get paid. and that may mean putting a diagnosis on the client. Just be sure that when you put a diagnosis, it meets all of the criteria. And when we're looking at DSM-5 diagnosis, it will always tell you that the person has to meet a certain number of the criteria. Sometimes it's the person has to meet all of the criteria to qualify for the diagnosis. And sometimes it will say the person must meet 3 out of 9 criteria in the last 6 months. So you want to pay attention to that, because that's that's a big cue for you, or clue for you, about what you need to look for and how you need to phrase that. And then when you're putting your diagnosis into your treatment plan, it's a good idea to use as close to the language in the DSM-5 as you can. All right, anything else that you thought about that? Austin, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
All right, so there we go. So my group had mentioned that like sometimes diagnoses can come with a stigma, and like say like someone needs like a security clearance or is trying to get hired somewhere or is in a custody battle. Is there like an ethical line, or like what is that ethical line of when should we like formally make that diagnosis and when should we not? You know, at the client's like discretion. Say like the client doesn't want a diagnosis for that reason, so that the records can't be pulled and used against them.
Yeah. I think probably the place that I've seen that most, Austin, is working with military. That's changing some, but it has not changed. It's not changed totally. And so when military personnel come in for counseling, I am extremely cautious about progress notes and what I list, and you know, this is one of the places that a lot of times I will go to a diagnosis code of let's see, how is it worded? It means life transitions. That they're in a period of life transition. Even then, with certain situations like that, we know that any information that military has been to counseling can sometimes restrict their promotions, their advancement, and that's true in other occupations as well. So we have to be as responsible as we can. For myself, and I would recommend to you, don't be scared. Do your job and do it well, and document what you do. And then my belief, I've just had to trust that God is going to take care of all of the rest of that I'm going to do the best I can for a client when they come through my door. And then God will work the rest of it out. I don't know if that helps a lot. You're absolutely right. It can come with a stigma, and it can impact people's ability to get security clearances. Now, again, that's if they own up to going to counseling. Otherwise, how is anybody going to know? Because you're sure not going to. You're not going to break confidentiality and go to a prospective employer and say, "Hey, I think you need to know this about this guy." You know, and honestly, that's become an issue for me a couple of times ethically, where I was working with pastors who were being less than ethical in their behavior, actively involved in pornography, actively involved in an affair, actively using drugs. But I was bound and am by confidentiality that I cannot go to their boards or their superiors or whatever. I can't disclose that information. And that's heartbreaking to see somebody getting in the pulpit week after week after week, knowing that they're living a lie. But those are all things. They're just part of the job, guys, and we get through it. We our network is our peer teams. They are critical for our sanity and our preventing burnout and to help keep us in line ethically. Any other thoughts that you had about this? This is a great list, you guys.
Yeah, I have another question.
Yeah.
So what if you are working with, maybe you work with a certain population group, and for the most part, they really are just not everyone, but most of them are in that life transition. And so you come in and you just are writing adjustment disorder. Is there anything that you ever have to worry or think about? Okay, when somebody reviews this, if they see that you're writing adjustment disorder for 60% of the time, are they going to come back and say, okay, you got to prove that that's what it was versus this? Or
well, if you're going to write adjustment disorder, you're going to prove that anyway.
Okay.
If you're going to give a diagnosis of adjustment disorder, you're going to give your criteria. And sometimes will they come back? Yes, they will. Some insurance companies will come back just as a matter of course when you give an adjustment disorder. They'll challenge it just as a matter of course. So you want to be able, this is where you want to be able to make a good case for your client. And a lot of times that's where the things like going back to the DSM criteria and saying, well, this client doesn't meet the criteria for this behavior or these symptoms being 6 months or longer. This is these criteria have only shown up in the last month. And so I can't give that diagnosis because the patient doesn't, or the client doesn't meet criteria. Okay. Now, if you're really lucky, you've got a case manager on your staff that does that arguing for you. Was one of the things I loved about being at the hospital. As long as I had my ducks in a row in terms of the criteria and it was worded appropriately, if something got sent back or kicked back, we had a case manager, and that was her job, was to go to battle for that. And at least in the 2 hospitals I worked in, the case managers were awesome. They were bulldogs for the patients. So, which of course meant getting a hospital paid as well, but they really were bulldogs for the patients. So, all right. So, help? Any other questions?
Yeah, just one last thing. Is trauma the same as like life transition? Like if they're in some traumatic situation that they know they would be better if they were out of it, or no?
Okay. Depends on the situation. If there is PTSD or domestic violence involved, typically it's going to meet criteria for it's typically going to have lasted long enough, and it's going to be interruptive enough of the client's life, that it's going to meet criteria for um, um, I'm trying to think. I think there's a V code for domestic violence, but I'd have to look that up again. I don't know that one off the top of my head. But the other thing is when we're diagnosing PTSD, there are some pretty strict criteria for diagnosing PTSD. So, we just can't say that because somebody is experiencing trauma that they have PTSD, because they may not meet the criteria. Now, in that case, though, they may meet the criteria for depression. That's the other thing, is we have those additives that we can put on, or I'm trying to think of one that we could use. There are often specifiers. That's the word I'm looking for. There are specifiers. So we might give a diagnosis, and the specification might be the diagnosis with anxiety features. And that's totally legitimate to do that. And we can use as many specifiers as are appropriate in our diagnosis, which is also different than it had been previously. Okay, we're gonna try some of this. We're gonna work with some of this and do some of it together, so that we're gonna talk about a diagnosis tree, and but I think you've got a good grasp of why diagnosis can be important, and some of the pieces involved in it, and why sometimes it can be problematic. So diagnosis for us, as John says, is going to inform treatment plan. So when we have those symptoms that we've noticed, that we've pulled together, then we're going to look at treatment planning. And I got to keep moving here. Let me have to stop sharing that. Where's my treatment plan? I like Zoom, but I don't like that it doesn't let me. It doesn't keep, there it is. Try this again. This is a diagram that you're going to see in week 1 under learning activity 1. I'm going to move you guys over so you can see this. As we look at treatment plans, there are a number of things that we want to include, and you will find dozens of different ways to do treatment plans if you search Google. And one of the things that you're going to need to be aware of or to remember is you do your treatment plan however your site says to do it. You accommodate your site. It may not be exactly the way we've taught you to do it, and you can use any information to put your treatment plan together. But when it comes to actually forming the treatment plan and putting it in writing or on the computer or whatever, you want to be compliant with your site's requirement. So having said that, and that'll be important when you get to practicums and internships too. Once we get our list of criteria, and typically what I'll do is I'll just make a symptom list. And from that symptom list, then I typically will go to character structure. Do I have enough information here to tell me where this person might be deficit in character structure and where we might need to start? If I've got some idea of that, then I'm going to come to treatment approach. For instance, if I have someone that I know is struggling with, well, if I have somebody that I know is struggling with attachment, can you think of a theoretical approach that I might pull in that might be helpful for that person?
You mean like CBT?
Can't hear you. Louder, whoever is talking.
CBT?
What's that? What night? CBT, did you say? Okay. Why would CBT be a good choice for someone who is needing to work on attachment? What would we be? What would CBT be bringing into the treatment?
You could look at the dynamics of how that person thinks about the relationships, or how that and how that might affect their behaviors and therefore their feelings in that sort of circle of attachment.
Yeah, exactly right, Isaac. And then any idea what an intervention might be?
Like for instance, the person is having a particularly difficult time attaching and have all these negative thoughts. You might counter that. You could restructure some of their thinking, or even thought stopping. You could do that too.
Thought stopping, yeah. Yeah. That's exactly the way we want to kind of tie things in. Is okay, if I know that this person has this character structure or this character deficit need, then and you know, I'm going to look into that. I'm going to be looking at, is it level 1, is it level 2, is it level 3? And so if I know this, then what is the most helpful theory or approach? Because I can pull from any of them. You know, we could do some internal family systems work. We could do some parts work. You know, there's all kinds of directions that we could go that are appropriate and evidence-based, which is another one of our criteria. Appropriate and evidence-based that would be helpful for a client. So you're going to start with a theoretical approach, maybe more than one. Then you're going to put together aims and objectives, and what is it that the client wants to achieve. And this is one of the places where a lot of times I'll use miracle question. What's going to look different for you when your life is going the way you want it to, or when things are when you are feeling healthy? What's your life going to look like? And then we set goals to target that future, that hopeful future for the client. Some clients will struggle with that. And so we become the carriers of the hope while they are getting to a place where they can hope. And so we're looking for very simple steps, basic steps. I've always, from the first time I went into practice, I've told my clients, let's only worry about the next right step. Because if we keep building next right step on next right step on next right step, you're going to get where you want to get, or where you need to get. You're going to use, we're going to use the SMART goals framework, and you're going to see a lot more of that in week 2. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to talk about that tonight, but SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, and so they're there's some teeth to them. They're not just my client won't be depressed and the client won't be experiencing depression anymore. Well, how will we know that? How will we be able to measure that the client is not experiencing depression as they were when they first came in to see us? And then we're always looking for research-based interventions and treatments. That's what we're going to plug in. Often those are going to be tied to those the theoretical approach that we're taking at a particular time. Now, once I've got all this information gathered together, I'm going to tell you that there are times when I choose the interventions and treatments first, and then tie it back into a theoretical basis. You know, if I can see that a client really needs to do some parts work, then I'm going to line up for myself what I see happening, and then I'm going to tie that back in to an IFS theoretical approach. So this week, you're going to be focusing quite a bit on treatment plans, and it won't just be this week. I'm going to really encourage you, as you are reading your chapters, that at the end of the chapter, there is a treatment plan for the case that's presented at the beginning of the chapter. These are they're well done. So pay attention to the language that's used. Pay attention to questions that are answered, to information that's included. And those will be some good templates for you in practicing writing treatment plans. So I'm going to stop that one right now, and I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint.
Hey, Mary, I have a question.
Go
Can I ask
ahead.
one right now?
Yeah.
So choosing a theoretical model, it seems like in the book, they lean very heavily on cognitive models.
Yes, they do.
Which is fine, I guess. I don't really have a theoretical model yet. But what if you wanted to lean more psychoanalytic, or like EFT or that kind of thing? Would you have to like attach to an assignment, for instance, like a peer-reviewed article, or would you just assume that I can do this?
No, that would be attaching a peer-reviewed article would be an excellent way to just get in practice of doing those kinds of things. Because even when you're writing treatment plans out in the field, there are times when a good peer-reviewed article can argue better than anything. If you've got the criteria for the patient, if you've got verified criteria for the patient, then a good peer-reviewed article can validate your not just your diagnosis, but it can validate your treatment interventions. because you're able to show that in situations like this, these interventions have been effective.
Hmm.
Okay, so great question. Move that over a little bit. I'm going to kind of go through these next slides pretty quickly. They're just ones that they've asked us to be sure that we include. The client's cultural and ethnic environment is always going to be something that we are going to need to factor into treatment plan. You know, somebody who is coming from an environment where they're struggling to find food to eat or to pay their rent is not going to be a client that is going to be a high, giving that client bibliotherapy, a book that we suggest that they read and study and come back in and talk with us about. They've got too much on their mind to sit and read a book and take it in. So we need to think about what's going on culturally, environmentally, and with a person's ethnicity. You know, if we're working with, say we're working with an Asian who barely speaks English, asking them to journal all week long, we're just gonna be putting additional stress on them. So we need to be able to find another way for them to begin to express themselves other than writing in a journal. We want to always keep those things in mind as we're working with clients. Just to review the syllabus a little bit, the mission of Concordia and the mission of Townsend. Always to empower, I think it's to empower you guys to grow in that character, competence character, and connection. I think that for me summarizes it. Dr. Townsend's virtual classroom is week 4, and that information is in his Dr. Townsend's virtual classroom on your blackboard on that left-hand side. Read assignments carefully. This course has been redone, and actually it's been redone twice now. And so some assignments have changed, but if there's something that's confusing for you in an assignment, I'm reading ahead of you and trying to stay on top of things. But if there's something that's confusing, please shoot me an email or let's talk about it and let's see if we can get it straightened out, because you guys are the other pair of eyes on the other sets of eyes on these assignments. But read them carefully. For instance, this week in learning activity 3, when you take the quiz, it does not specifically say that you are to read chapter 2 before you take the quiz. However, up in the top, where it says reading assignments or reading for the week, it says there to read chapter 1 and chapter 2. I went back and tried, after somebody asked about this, I went back and tried to insert that into that quiz learning activity. I can't alter the quiz. It's set up and we can't alter that shell. We can't alter that assignment. So I will turn that in as something that needs to be fixed, but I can't guarantee it'll be fixed this week. If I can fix things, I just go in and fix them and then make a note and turn them into the team. Also, you might want to look ahead because your final project in this class is to write a treatment plan for either a fictional or a historical figure. It can be either one, but you're going to want to choose because by week 3, you're going to start writing your paper so that, again, you're going to write pieces at a time so that it's not all on you week 7 to put together. You know, it could be Abraham Lincoln, it could be George Washington, it could be George Wallace, it could be Donald Trump, it could be you can pick, could be Sherlock Holmes. You get to pick the fictional or historical figure, but you are going to create a treatment plan for them as your final assignment. So kind of be thinking about that, maybe chatting. Homework partner videos, pretty much the same as they've been before. You're going to be demonstrating particular skills. Be sure that you submit your feedback in the comment section. We're getting really strong on that, and my game plan is to when you get your role plays turned in, I will grade those before I grade anything else. And I'm making it a goal to get your role play feedback back to you by the next week, by the end of the next week after you submit them. So if you submit them on Sunday, I will have them back to you by the next Sunday at the latest. Anytime you want to talk about a video or go over it or process it together, I'm always happy to set up a time for us to meet and we can go over videos. Writing, you're going to do APA style. That's not changed. There are some resources that are available to help you if you need that. We're looking for clinical writing at this point. You guys do pretty well with that, so I'm not concerned about that. Same thing as always about late assignments. Assignments are due no later than midnight. Now, you also need to know that the last week of class, assignments will be due on Friday. Not Sunday, but Friday. Let me know if something comes up. I will typically be, I'll work with you as much as I can. This is the reasonable accommodations, honesty and plagiarism. If you've got technical problems, please contact IT. This is something that's new. So they wanted us to be sure to point this out to you. If you can't get assignment in because of IT issues, then you have to have a ticket from IT that says that you have you have talked with them about that and that they're working on getting it fixed for you. But you have to have the actual ticket. They've not required that before, but this time you have to have the actual ticket. And I think that's everything that I need to go over with you tonight. What questions, thoughts do you have? We're coming up to the end of our time here.
I have a question, Mary.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Are you still doing optional classes on the weeks we don't have required?
That's exactly what I just did the about, because I forgot to put that on the slides. And the answer to that is yes, I will continue to do optional classes on the nights that we don't have required classes. So that'll be week 2. Not week 4, because that's John's virtual class, and you'll have a heavy enough load. And so then week 6, And then we can take a look at week 7 and see if we need to meet week 7, we can. Okay. But the same time and next week, our game plan is to do as much demoing of what's coming up in the assignments. Like, for instance, next week is a SMART goals, the focus is on SMART goals. So I think it would be good for us to look at creating some SMART goals. Okay.
Thank you.
Mary, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually have 2 questions. You asked at the beginning of the class to share resources that we find.
Yes.
What method would you like us to use to share those resources?
How about if I create a folder in Blackboard where you can all just plug in anything that you find, and that way you should be able to then download that folder.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great. Thank you. My other question was, in the original sort of schedule that I was given at the very beginning of the program, we had originally were scheduled to have that week of May 10th off in between the 2 7-week sessions. But now we have the Easter week off and they've bumped everything down. So is there no longer a week between the 2 7-week sessions? When we finish in May, are we jumping the 1 weekend off and then
right into the next one? Let me double check with Dina on that, but I think the answer to that, as sad as it is I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
And again, we didn't have a choice about putting that spring break in. It's that college is doing it, Concordia is doing it, and they insisted that everybody take that week off. So,
okay.
But I will double check that and I will let you know for sure. But
Thank you.
But I think it's yes.
Thank you.
I think it's take a deep breath and jump off the diving board again. All right, other questions?
Got a quick question about the textbook. So I purchased an e-text where I'm not able to click on the video links in the text. I just wanted to ask how valuable you think those extra resources are in that book and if they're worth purchasing.
I think the answer to that is yes, they are worth purchasing. However, there is enough information in the textbook itself that you are not going to be, you're not going to be cheated if you don't do that. It's something that is valuable. Anything that you can, anytime you can see role plays or discussions or follow-ups of some of the points in the text, it's a valuable thing. And Pearson does really well with the information that they provide. However, I know that for some people, getting for one thing, Michelle, let me check. I don't understand why, if you got the e-text, you didn't get those sources.
Yeah, so I think I purchased it through Amazon and not through the Pearson website. And I may look into seeing if I can return the Amazon version and just get the Pearson one. When I looked on the Pearson website, to me it looked like I could only get the text for a year with the resources, and so I wanted to have it permanently. So I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah. I just purchased the text because even when we get a desk copy of the text, Pearson will give us a desk copy of the text, but my last desk copy didn't have access to any of the resources. So this time I bought a text, and it has a code.
Okay.
In the text. And so that's what I'm using. I just, Misha, totally leave it up to you guys.
All right.
You know,
Thank you.
if you can afford it, it's a good thing to do. If you're strapped for funds, which, you know, that could, what college student is not strapped for funds at times, but then it's something that you can pass on without without missing what you need.
And how do you access it? How do you access it? Because I bought the hard copy text, but I thought when I bought it, it said that it came with the extra virtual things.
Yeah, did you not get a code?
I don't think so, but I can't see
Wendy,
that.
Wendy, I just found this in the very back of my book. I didn't
Yeah.
think I got a code either, but I just found this in the very back of my
Yeah,
textbook.
it's on in the very
Okay.
back cover of your
I'll
book.
look.
Yeah.
Squarely.
Oh
If you
man, I might
didn't
need to get out
that-
to the trash tonight too.
Oops.
I bought mine on Amazon too.
Did you get yours?
Okay.
Wendy, did you get yours on Amazon?
Yes.
Then it
I
should have been
did.
in the back corner
I'll
or the
look.
back cover. If it wasn't, contact Amazon because they should send you that. Okay. All right. Thank you all. I'm looking forward to this time. This is great stuff. It's exciting to jump into this, and so I'm looking forward to seeing treatment plans from you guys and to having some good discussions with you about identifying criteria and those kinds of things. So we're off to the races, and I will see you all. Those of you who want to, I will see you next Monday evening. You always can contact me if you need to. And thank you, and get a good night's sleep. Rest and restore. All right. Night.